All right, this is a very, very special day for Black Music Archive. We have the great, the fabulous, one of the greatest voices of all time, Aprile Millo, soprano, Verdi soprano, and just soprano extraordinaire, period, is
Thank you
on
so
the
much.
channel to discuss her career, music, and all things. And but this interview is also special because my co-host and one of BMA's biggest contributors, producers, and help, Matt Brown, will be leading this just amazing discussion with her. So, Matt Brown, thank you for being here as always.
Thank you.
Maestro Milo, thank you for accepting this.
Thank you so
And
much, Malik.
Matt, take it away.
Thank you. Well, once again, we cannot tell you how much we appreciate this opportunity to get the chance to speak with such a legendary, esteemed artist. And the question that I would like to start with you is because on Black Music Archive, we're a music education platform, but on this platform, we try to elevate and educate others about our culture through this. And on the subject of your career and the music you sing, you made your culture known throughout the world with this beautiful romantic Italian music that you took all over the world. So we have the same goals, even though we look a little different. And so, on the subject of that lovely Italian style, the Italianita that you're known
Right?
for, when we talk about your career, we constantly find references to your artistry and your voice as this authentically Italianate sound, which
Mm.
comes from the Italian tradition, very similar to a Tebaldi or a Poncelle.
Oh,
Can you
thank you.
share? It's the truth. Can you share with our viewers what are some of the defining characteristics of this true, authentic Italian sound and the Italian style?
It's interesting because if you go, it's a fantastic question. When you go and listen to an orchestra, you're going to say that's a cello, and you're going to say that's a violin, and that's the bass violoncello, which is the longer version. You're going to have an oboe, you're going to have a clarinet. So with the soprano, she should be able to sing everything if she's based in Bel Canto, which means beautiful singing, but it also means so much more. It's the Kobe Bryant, it's the best, it's the goat, it's the way you want your entire life is to sing with an even tone, an even emission. Nothing stands out, nothing is screamed. Yes, there are dramatic moments, but Bel Canto as a bass, right? Then you say, what is the distinct timbre of it? Is it a cello? Is it an oboe? Is it a clarinet? Because there's so many different kinds of voices. We're all like little snowflakes. Everything is so individual, right? If you're looking for a Verdi voice, you're looking for a Strad. If I may even give myself that a compliment because you were kind enough to say that. It is the Strad. It has the deepest, most beautiful melodic sound. It has the more round evenness of emission. It has an extension that is very high for some of the operas. When you consider that Verdi wrote a lot of his operas at different keys, you could see, well, I understand, okay, this is going to be a big stretch for the changes in the diapason and for the etc., etc. It is supposed to sound like Burgundy wine. If you could taste it, that's what it would sound like, Burgundy. The way it swirls around on the glass, you see various kinds of red, you see various kinds of purple and deep body. And it has to be, to me, I think Rosa Poncelle is the perfect example of what I think a Verdian voice is, and Renato Tebaldi for the harmonics and for the beauty. Then you have all your little variations on the theme of Paganini, more or less, on the theme of Verdi, in which you have all these wonderful souls that come at you with their own message. And that's why, if you do the Bel Canto technique leading you into the Verdi, you're set. Because Verdi is, to me, charismatic Bel Canto.
When we discuss the Italian style, operatically, especially as it pertains to the soprano, there is such a vast difference depending on the time period of what we're dealing with, even
Right?
in the Italian style. So I love that phrase, verismatic bel canto. Could you sort of walk us through the different hallmarks of the style as we go from a bel canto to a Verdi to a Verismo? Because you've sung everything
It's
and
been
very
very,
well.
very lovely, the journey so far. To be able to touch, I've always felt like I'm an eagle soaring, and every once in a while I get to touch down and be a part of the earth, which I consider the Verismo. And when I'm flying and I'm soaring, I'm in Verdi and I'm in Bel Canto. So the Verismo doesn't mean that it's earthly, it just means it gets in touch with something that's really real and important. And Verdi can say, I love you over 82 bars. In Verismo, you would already have the entire story, you would have the phone number, and you would know how to reach each other at the end of it. It's very honest. It's very, as you and I are speaking to each other, that's how it would be. In the more Bel Canto, which was written during the time of the sexy poets Shelley and Keats, you had a melancholy like, oh, isn't he wonderful? Isn't she great? I wonder, I wonder. The melancholy under the trees isn't, does her hair, does his hair, does. So that's Bel Canto in a sense of lunar, this floating magic, this magnificent amplification of life, right? They didn't have cell phones back then. They
No.
didn't have instant coffee. They didn't have this craze. So human beings were the special effects.
When we look at the different styles as we go through time periods, it seems as though as we get closer and closer to modern day, that the music is more dramatic in emotion and dramatic for the type of voices that it requires, or that seems to be the style today. And I'm curious if, in your experience, if you find that that is true, or if
When you
that's more
say
of a modern.
dramatic, though, excuse me for interrupting you now, Matt. When you say
Please.
dramatic, do you mean that you're making dramatic tones? They're loud and they can be sometimes ugly to express an emotion? Or are you saying it's what? Because
I
it's
mean
very,
more.
very valuable, your answer, because it does
I
explain.
I mean in the terms of in our modern day, it is not the case that you will see the same soprano sing Lucia and Chenier.
But yes, that's true, because she's not founded in the bel canto technique. If she sounded and sang everything with that, she could. What you find are the young singers today, and here's a very controversial. Young singers today are asked to sing Mozart. Now, Mozart is for a master. Most of the schools start the young voices in a master's cloth. Well, how can they do that? They're just starting. So a lot of them get into a straitjacket, they develop a wobble, they develop an over vibrato, they know nothing about the mask, and they know nothing about breath. So then you say, well, why aren't you going back to the school the way it originated in the days of Marchese, of not even Bacai, but more of the Garcia, the old school of Bel Canto, in which they all got together and decided these are the rules that we want for gorgeous singing. And strangely enough, it coincided with longevity and the ability to be able to sing whatever you want to sing, right? With your own voice. Are you right singing all of it? I don't know. But at least you can with health. Nowadays, you find young women, especially women with talented or exceptional middle voices, that fool themselves. And you hear that, oh, they have such wonderful, beautiful sounds. And then they're singing Handel, and you think, oh, that's just gorgeous. And then the next week, you hear them singing Nenolisko. Well, you can get your watch out.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's Apple or it's an Android, whatever it is, you can count down 5 years. Bye. Because it's not going to stay, right? No matter how you do it, you cannot mix things. You grow towards it.
And on that subject of technique as it pertains to the styles, do you consider technique differently when you go from a Verdi aria in a concert to Boito or later music?
No, I try to sing everything pretty much with the even emission, with the proper support, with breath support. The top does not become a different sound. The middle is not a different sound. The bottom is not a different sound. It's just different registers, of course. It brings a different excitement if you have a little bit of steel. Because I was always, I think, a lirico spinto d'agilità, which kind of gave me a really lovely, I could sing what I wanted to. Tried to most of the time. And, but no, no.
Well, if I may ask on that subject, because you are one of the few people, especially those who had an American-based career, who is able to, no, I will wait to debut till it's a leading role. Most people come up through little roles in little houses, and that was not your experience. You're always the
When you
lead.
say I have an American-based, I'm not quite sure, because most of my early success was in Europe. I made my debut at La Scala. The very first time I sang, I was Aida in Karlsruhe. And then the Met came with the debut offer, and then, of course, the rest is history. And as I fashioned myself after Poncel and Milanov and Muzio, I wanted to stay in one place where I was sure of the quality. And then I would take these lovely, fantastic summers in Italy, and I did beautiful work in Germany, but very rare. I wanted to make sure that where I went, they understood what I was, and that they give me enough rehearsal to explore the text and the pieces. You know, you treat them with respect, the audience sees that respect, and they go crazy. But yes, I was sort of cocky. I realized that if I release myself in a smaller role, I will never be seen in anything else. How you are seen first is how they will view you, in my mind. And if you don't want to be somebody who's constantly singing Third Lady from the Left or anything else, it's not like Broadway. You can make an impression in a smaller role and then work your way up. In opera, I think you have to be very selective and be sure of your conditions. So yes, I was very cocky. I said, I'm going to wait until you give me a lead role, because I believed that God had a plan, and I believed that I had to stay to that. You know, and I had fights actually when they offered me at the Met originally. This wonderful lady, God bless her, offered me, get this, Helmvige, because they thought the voice was large. So I said, what? Then she said, the celestial voice. And I said, yes, that's spectacular, but you know, you're doing this program. It was at the Metropolitan Opera program that they started, and I was one of the initial members. I said, you're doing this to find Pavlovas. You're not doing this to find, because she said, you lack a esprit de corps. I said, you're looking for Pavlovas, not the esprit de corps. And of course, I was immediately ushered out of the office, and I stayed there only after Maestro Divine got involved and understood what I was. But if he hadn't stepped in, I'm sure I would have been ushered out with my Pavlova dreams of success. And nothing wrong with it. It's actually very old-fashioned. It's the Italian way. You study a role, you go to the provinces, you sing it, you wait to be seen by the bigger houses, and then you make your break. But I kind of cut through all of that and got out of the plans for me, which was really lovely.
Upon doing research for the interview, we learned that you appreciate gospel music.
Oh, yes, I do.
And you're a fan of Mahalia Jackson. Could you just share with us what you love about her voice and just gospel music, period?
As it's hard to explain. You know, it's hard to explain when you listen to someone and they start to sing and it hits you in the solar plexus and it talks to your inner soul. When Mahalia Jackson opened her mouth, I went, uh-oh, this is truth. This is truth staring me right in the face. She had a direct and beautiful quality, like she was talking to God. She was telling your story to him, her story, everybody's story, and she was getting a little feedback from him. So whenever she opened her mouth, and frankly, in any of the gospel music, it's one of the things that I'm so sorry, with respect to everyone, because I think it's absurd, I would imagine, for a white person to sing the gospel music, but it's so beautiful. But you have to have the right voice. There again, it's another invitation. She sang, and there's also another fantastic woman that used to sing, and I can't recall her name, but it leads all the way to current school, where I believe it's the Winan family, or there's something with a W, that are really spectacular singers, and they wail away, but it's not screaming. It's actually really fantastic, high, almost operatic singing that then they're able to bring into their mid voice and lower instrument. I follow it religiously. Besides, I also like to go to the churches, the Baptist and the Methodist a little less, but Baptist and most of the Black churches, because there I feel God is truly celebrated. Because I went to a funeral once, a dear friend of mine, and I left there smiling, which you're not supposed to at a funeral, but I felt like he had gone home. It was the first time I'd ever heard anyone express it, that you were not leaving and that it was a dark and horrible place and you were in purgatory, and these are many things that my faith teaches me, which of course fills me with enormous fear. But when you go, you have grief counselors that are dressed magnificently with their little white gloves and their little prayer things on their lapels. And I'm looking like, this is the way to support congregation.
So I've spoken with Denise Greaves and Grace Bumbry, and something I've been interested in exploring and is like the overlap between gospel and opera. And from your point of view, as someone who sings so many different types of, as someone who appreciates the art form and sings opera, do you yourself notice any overlap between the two genres?
Yes, because a lot of the education for the singing starts in the church. And if you've listened to Patti LaBelle, or you've listened to, I would say, even Mariah Carey, who also had, I think, a grandmother or a mother who was an opera singer, you can see the technique, because in order to get to the top, you've had to go into the mask, right? So all these fantastic people are wailing away. Now, Aretha in the beginning sang with more technique than she sang at the end. She was just wailing away, but it was that marvelous, almost like Janis Joplin kind of howling, because she had emotion, she had passion. Aretha was a great friend. I absolutely adored her. She came many times when I would sing, and I was so privileged and happy. She loved opera. When she did Luciano's little cover when he was unable to sing, I sat up and took notice because I could understand the words. She understood the words. She was giving her own kind of what they would do in Rossini's time, which was her own version of a famous melody. She was adding all these extra riffs and all these extra things that you wouldn't do in Puccini, but boy, did it deliver it. It was fantastic. It had its own. I mean, the opera purists were going, what are you talking about? I said, no, listen to her. She knows the words. She understands what she's saying. It's a modern Rossini version of this, because she's adding her own embellishment.
Speaking of high notes, as you know, gospel is built around high notes, and my first introduction to you was through a high note. I was in like eighth grade, and someone on YouTube made a video of women who sung the E flat and the triumphal scene.
Yes.
So it's just like, it's very, very rare for like a soprano to have like notes ready or above high C on the stage, but
Right.
especially for your kind of voice to have that top. So could you just share with us how you discovered the top and how you decided to incorporate that into the triumphal scene in Verona and Central Park?
Well, first off, I should be spanked royally for adding it, but it is it's a circus note, and sometimes you add it in for the pleasure of the people. It's not written, but then, of course, the end of Di Quella Piera is not a high C either, so a lot of the tenors would add it. For me, my early childhood, I had a very, very mezzo-ish, very, very small range. And I happened to fall in love with a young man in school who loved Joan Sutherland and Richard Bonning. So we would sit in Newport Beach, and I would be howling to try and find the top part, putting in the mask, doing that, and it enlarged the extension. So then when I realized that I had that, I built my whole technique on Bel Canto. And I do wish I had been able to sing when I got to work with Maestro Bonning, and we work every summer now. with my academy in Italy. He said, I don't know why you didn't sing more Bel Canto pieces, because you have this facility and you have the trill. And I loved it, just absolutely loved being able to do the movement, the agility. But for me, adding the high E, I've never seen such hysteria, because when I did it originally in Brazil, people were racing the stage, trying to get over the orchestra pit, trying to get to the stage. It was like there had been one of the newspapers said, it was like she scored a goal in soccer. And then I did it in the United States, and I thought, well, they're going to be a little bit more staid. No, they were throwing programs, they were jumping on ceilings, they were jumping out of boxes. It was very exciting. It's an exciting note. You don't expect it. The brass is written with it, in it. So I've never understood why Verdi didn't allow that, but Verdi didn't want also the high D flat at the end of the trio in the first act. So, however, he understood it because of a coloratura or a voice of agility is going to sing his music. I think he would have accepted it. Maybe not the E flat, but the ending for for several of his other operas where people would add things just for the pleasure of the people.
So, on the subject of Bel Canto and some like earlier music, again, some things we learned doing research. Not a lot of people know that you know the score to Medea. It was engaged to happen, and it ended up not happening for various reasons.
Yes, I was so excited about this. It was with Richard Boning. He was going to conduct it, so we would have had an absolutely vortex kind of reading of it. The Italian Medea, the one that Maria Callas, of course, made famous, and they just recently attempted it at the Met with tremendous success. It's a great opera, and it's something that's usually done trying to be an actress as Medea instead of just letting Medea speak. I mean, when you follow a Callas in this, who is Greek, who was speaking to the converted already in her own heart and her own soul. And she did that in many, many roles that were really wonderful. But Medea was an absolute triumph, was an amalgamation of everything she was and is. Yes, I would love to have sung that. I mean, life isn't over, but Mother is getting old, but we'll see what happens.
You still sound fabulous. It's not too late for
I'm
anything.
having a lot of fun. I have a few surprises coming up, which I'm happy about. If we can roll that out, roll myself out there. I do have to get rid of a little bit of the blubber suit that I assimilated over the years, and so that I want to be more convincing on stage for pretty much the same reason that Callas did it. You don't want to be up there heavy, 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 especially as an older woman, because then it looks like someone's singing with their mom. And you don't want that. You want to suspend the disbelief enough to say, yeah, you could be who you are. So,
I think we go to the theater to hear beautiful music sung and played as best as possible, and whatever package that voice comes in does not matter because they can be costumed to be made beautiful. And it is, I think, really non-realistic to think that people of all different sizes and ages don't get in love triangles like operatic characters do.
well,
Everybody.
I'm right there with you, Matt. I'll let you say it.
But that leads us really well into our next question. Over the past few years, especially really over the pandemic, it seems like there's been a lot more conversation within the classical music industry
Right.
about modernizing opera, about making operas more diverse, about really sort of opening up the way that the stories that we see that are traditional, how they're presented. And I would just like to ask you to speak on the subject of, diversity, modernization, body positivity, just the general subject in opera, because you're renowned for bringing old school tradition to the modern future, and you're also known for being a very strong champion of Black talent. So I know you feel strongly about this like we do, and we just love to give you an opportunity to
Well,
speak.
no, you're putting two things together now when you say modernization of opera,
Mm-hmm.
and then there is another discussion which is more inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want me to address both of that, I can, but I would love to address first the modernization.
Okay.
I would like to ask you a question. Do you see a lot of this, what I call disease, attacking ballet?
No.
No. The Black Swan is always the Black Swan, and she dresses in her outfit, And we don't have her dressed as a bumblebee. We don't see her thrown into the back of a limousine. We don't have Las Vegas in the middle of the beautiful Swan Lake. No. So why is ballet treated with more respect than opera? Because opera probably, I guess, they think it's boring. They think no, it's not. It's more difficult to bring. If in films you have the Titanic, Mr. Cameron spent billions of dollars recreating everything so that it would be of the time, the costuming, the Titanic itself, the crash, the horrible tragedy that occurred. And here we find in opera, they are using interesting Broadway talent that does fantastic work there because they're working with usually a new piece or a piece of Americana or Oklahoma. You're not seeing them do this with Oklahoma, are you? Do we ever see it put in the middle of a mob scene? It's actually part of the mafia. No, they don't toy with stuff that they know. They toy with stuff they don't know. So for me, I don't believe the modernization, and I will go, I mean, I'm sure I'm going to lose a lot of people on this. I would love to have an opera house that has a week where you are allowed to absolutely destroy every single opera you want to and give a new idea of it. Have Death following Violetta around with a clock in the center of it. These are all very clever, really interesting kind of, why not? But if you're going to do the service to the art, you have to then allow the poor little souls that have never seen it before, not the jaded opera public that, oh, I want something different, I'm so bored. Give me a different singer. Give me a different variation. Give me actually one who knows the style. That's going to be a modernization. I would really love to see somebody who knows the style. Then give me a week where it's properly in costume, that's done correctly, that we're doing it exactly as the composer wanted. So you see, they think they have to have shock value in order to sell a piece that is filled with glorious melody. If you want ordinary life, go to a modern production. If you want magic, stay in your lane. So I'm never going to be the girl that's going to like it. I'm going to appreciate a well-made stretch or two, but not when you rewrite it. When it belongs to someone else, it's a sacred right. That man's soul exists on those pages. And it's your privilege to be able to spring it off that page into the hearts of a brand new generation. But do it right. Don't sell out because you think they're going to get bored. And yes, they do about 5,000 channels competing for interest. But when the real thing comes along, as it did years ago in Luciano, over 300 pounds, he's up there singing, sweating away, and everybody went, I'm in heaven.
So I actually have a question about that. Because like I said, a lot of my background is in theater. How I know when you modernize or revive a Broadway work, you have to like go through the person's estate or whomever owns it. How are they able to just completely rewrite something? Because are these things not protected, or because I know on Broadway that would never happen.
I think they're trying to explain. That's a very wise, and I'm going to steal that, okay? And I will give you credit for having come up with a brilliant. You are right. The Verdi estate has the right to charge for when you use it, but some of all of this, most of it, is public domain. When you have the Puccini, there are certain things you have to pay. Yes, that's true. But you are right. There should be a greater protection to it, but unfortunately, it's the almighty dollar. And they think the people are staying away from the opera in droves because there's nothing interesting on the stage. Because singers themselves stupidly said in the press that it's a museum and that people stand and bark. Well, they don't. They don't. And if you make each person aware that we are a living instrument, we're a living Stradivarius. We sing over an orchestra of at least 60 to 85 pieces on occasion. We sing in front of 100 chorus members. We're on a stage run by thousands of people, singing in front of 1,800, 900 people, 2,500 people, 4,000 people, 16,000 in the Arena di Verona. all without a mic. That shows a certain amount of athleticism. And we train and we work very hard to make this our little gramophone that goes out there. If anybody sits next to a child and makes a note, they giggle because they wonder, how are you doing that?
Mm-hmm.
Why can't we bring that wonder and beauty and acceptance and miraculous occasion to the audience? It should go back to the fact that it is a human triumph, a triumph of the human spirit to be heard over an orchestra without a mic. It shows athleticism, it shows technique, it shows beauty, and then what are you saying? So yes, you get the Callas's, you get the Madame Callas, you get Madame Tebaldi, you get Riesnik, you get Olivero, you get these people that are the rare combination of everything. Oh my goodness, they can act, they can do it. You say, oh my goodness, look what she's accomplishing. It's so special and wonderful. What did Herbert Breslin do with Luciano Pavarotti, who was the manager? He said, you're listening to something that's rare and special. Everybody's running. Everybody's running to see it because they want to see the Mona Lisa that sings. They want to see these rare art things. Okay, around it, yes, have your magnificent ballet that knows how to move briskly and beautifully, and have all of the things that opera's had over these years that make it beautiful and unique, but also to itself. That to me is, I think, the way to serve opera and to get them back in the house. If the people who are singing it say it's dead, we haven't got a chance. If the people who are singing it saying it's the greatest, most emotional thing I've ever gone through, I start to cry on the inside and then I sing and you hear my tears. What a beautiful thing to say, what a beautiful thing to think. Go back to the beautiful and stop selling out. That's what I would say to them.
It hasn't survived for 300 years being something it was not.
Exactly.
On the subject of modernization, something that you were a part of that I don't think a lot of people are aware of, when the Metropolitan first put in the super titles, you sang Des Damon in that original run of Otello's when they put it in.
Right.
What was that experience like with the insertion of the super titles on the backs of the chairs? What was that like for you?
I think it's, in hindsight, I was very upset about it because I think it takes the attention away from the stage. But when I really realized how much we're dumbing down this art form, it's very helpful. And it's very beautiful that the Metropolitan Opera put it on the back of the seat because you can be discreet. It's not above. The proscenium then interfering with the proscenium arch, and that's our window into another world. Okay, not everybody can afford to do that. I mean, the Met is magnificent in its technical prowess. It brings it right there in 4 or 5 different languages. And yes, it allows them to understand the text. So yeah, that's beautiful. It's like if we pick up a Russian poetry book, we're not going to know the genius of that unless it's translated. So yes, in hindsight, I was very much against it. Now I'm the more that understand it, the more that can be captivated.
Beautifully put, beautifully put. And then once again on the subject of modernization and diversity,
Right.
I know you are a big champion of Black talent. One of the main ways that I got to know you, apart from your artistry, was following other Black singers. And Latanya Moore says Aprile Millo really likes her a lot. I'm like, okay, we have the same taste. Okay, that's my girl.
Oh, Latonia is phenomenal.
Absolutely
I love
fabulous.
Latonia. One of the great voices of today.
What do you feel like is possible for what do you think is possible that's actionable for those of us that are fans, for those of us that are great supporters of the art form? How do you feel like we can best make our voices heard so that in terms of diversity both on the stage and behind it?
I think it's being done now by this tremendous movement that happened that brought a lot of attention to the fact that a lot of our Black brothers and sisters were not really being given their chance. And so now it is very, very obvious that everyone is rushing to include people. I don't think it's born of any great enlightenment. I think it's born not to lose sponsorship or not to lose the attention of what can be a magnificent new public. If they see themselves on stage, they would most likely come and support. And there's a tremendous audience out there of Latin, of Black individuals that would really love to see themselves on there. And there's some fantastic voices. Where it's going to happen again is it has to be that in the schools they are trained correctly. Because no one turned their back on Leontine. No one turned their back on Grace. No one turned their back on Martina, on Riri Grist, on Shirley Verrat. No one does it. No. They came out there with the unique, with the absolute, with the correct styles, especially in the Black voices. I find that there's a shimmer. There's an added shimmer to their voices that you just go, wow, that is just so special. It's like Latavia stands on the stage. She delivers an old-fashioned, beautiful approach with a spectacular instrument. I've heard Marsha Thompson, also fantastic instrument. Eric Owens, fantastic instrument, even better than he knows. Karen Slack. You know, these are fantastic voices that are now getting an opportunity because they're trying to show that they're diverse. Let's hope it stays. But then it's the responsibility within the Black and the brown and the Latino and the Japanese, the Chinese, everything, that you are to bring your best game. Because it will eventually, the pendulum will come back into the middle again. And it will be whoever is the best will get the role. It shouldn't be whoever is white. And when I was younger, I had a mom who worked many times. She volunteered for Reverend Jackson's Rainbow Coalition. And in 1968, she took me to see a little city that had raised itself on the Potomac in protest when Martin Luther King was speaking. I'm not quite sure it's the I Have a Dream one, although wouldn't that be something if I was in that area as he said these things. And they had built in cardboard boxes and plastic to cover themselves because it started to rain, but they didn't want to leave. So all these little people are sitting there in the rain, in the mud, children, older ladies, fantastic sums of people. And you're going, I remember saying to my mother, why are they doing this to these people? Because I didn't see color, you see content, you see character. If you meet a white jerk, it's going to be the same as anybody else in any other color. They're a jerk. Doesn't matter what color they are. But you look at their content, you look at their behavior, you look at their intention. If they're noble and they're lovely people, who cares what color you are? Who cares who you love? It should be the content of your soul. So that's hard. We're living in very difficult times. Now opera is trying to include more people. And that is something we have to hope will be echoed outside of opera as well.
Because I can tell you feel so strongly about these things, is why I feel like we can have this, I can feel like I can ask you this next question.
Sure.
So there has been a little bit of a generational shift, and it's even gone from the time when I first started to study as a young teenager over the past 15 years or so, and
Right.
even longer than that. There has been a generational shift over what is acceptable in an operatic context in terms of makeup and hairstyling that alters a singer's appearance to be closer towards a character that might be of a different background.
Well, here again, we're going to have the merging of the two worlds, right? Let's blow our brains just a bit and think this. If the white community, a certain segment of unenlightened little people, have been taught to look on another segment of people as expendable, nothing, how can they first off be Christian? I don't know. Oh, we're all God's children. If you look at that and you say, I don't want anybody who's playing a black role, who is not black, to put on makeup, then they want to negate the fact that the character is black. So they're missing again. Let's just keep them out of the picture. Or cast the role with only a black soprano. Then I would never have had the honor of singing it. If we have that, then we can only cast Turandot with a Chinese woman. Lovely Chinese lady. Beautiful for Liu, the same thing. Only Japanese people can sing Butterfly. What have we done? We've allowed ourselves to hear the souls that we've shut out of the entire picture. So if you look at it and you say, yes, here again is the history of American musical theater. In the beginning, they had bluegrass and folk music and the banjo and all that stuff they'd be playing a long, long time ago. And they got bored. So a bunch of people went over, God forbid, ever. In the plantations, they went over to the Black community. Don't you know, they found fantastic music, fantastic lyrics, all of it fun, all of it with a beautiful rhythm. And they went, hey, I want that, but I can't ask the Black person to come on stage, so I'm going to have to look Black. So they made a parody. Again, we have to look at the intent of a person, like they do in court. What's the intent? The intent was to belittle. So they used cork, burnt cork, or they used shoe polish. And they made a parody out of the little person that they liked their music in order to make it palatable to the people who look down on them. So you look at this and you say, the intent of it was to belittle. The parody was to make some kind of a horrible thing out of what being Black was all about. And all of that is the first example of misinformation, because it informed an entire group about a community of human beings that were very far from what they were being shown to be. They were not listless, stupid, unable to speak, unable to move, unable to say. No, but that's what disinformation does to a public. It misinforms so that you can be manipulated or oppressed. As an actor, you are seeing that Giuseppe Verdi wrote Aida because he also grew up in a time where in Italy there was an enormous amount of racism all over the world, all over the world. What did he do with Aida? He made her a princess. He exalted her. He put her on rare terra firma, okay? So Ethiopia was the color that he chose for her. They're some of the darkest, most magnificent complexioned people in the world there. They are just stunning. He makes her that. He makes Radames brown. It's for the opening of the Cairo Opera House. But he does this in the face of the whole world. He goes, I'm going to make Aida a princess. Okay, so who am I? I get this magnificent piece and I go, oh, I get to be Aida, and she's an Ethiopian princess. I don't think anything else except in order to pay respect to his character, I must be Black. What a privilege. What a privilege. I had so many people come back and see me as Aida saying, you're white? Because I had done my job. I wanted to be her. I wanted to be Black. I wanted to show the world. Look at this magnificent creature who sees the heavens open and takes her love to another world. Look how in contact she is with the other world. She's spiritual and divine and beautiful. Thank you for letting me play her. Okay, what do I have to do this? I have to condition or move my hair in some way, so I wore a wig. Okay, and if I'm Ethiopian, I've got to be Black, otherwise I'm negating her Blackness. And I won't do that. How do I do that? So I became an Ethiopian princess. I'm an actress. If I'm playing a cop, I'm not going to carry a ladder. That would be for the firemen. If I'm playing any kind of a role, I want to do the best I can to be that person. I'm not going to dress as a lumberjack to be the Black Swan in Swan Lake. Okay, now we fast forward to this age where many people who have been left out of the banquet demanding a place at the table. You can't get from me anything other than they're absolutely right. So then you bring the two worlds together and you go, what makes the difference? You're both putting on something to be something you're not. And you can take it off, the people who are under oppression could not. So I've battled with that in my own mind. What are we then going to come down to is that no one can sing Otello, can sing Aida, I don't see anybody ever outside in Gershwin. They always do Porgy and Bess. It's always the lovely Black cast. So None of the whites have invaded there, although some of that music is magnificent. I'm sure they'd love to. Okay, music is magnificent everywhere. What do we do about clarifying and not conflating the two? Is to look at the intent. The intent of the person wearing the black is to tell the black story with respect. The intent of shoe polish is to denigrate and parody a great nation. That's what I did. That's my meager offer to all of you who see my tapes of me as Aida. I was doing that to play a black Ethiopian princess with respect, because there are not a lot of white Ethiopian princesses. So in order to have the honor of fulfilling what Verdi wrote in this long-winded answer I have, which I hope you'll bear with me because it makes me emotional. I don't want anyone to ever think that I did that without respect. I was not playing a minstrel show. I was not part of that evil history. I was part of a history of theater that brings that beautiful character to life so that you can see the exoticism and the beauty of what is an Ethiopian princess that a brown Egyptian man falls in love with, and at the end they both go to a god that has no color. So that's it. I feel very strongly, and I do understand why people are getting all over everybody, but I'm begging them, take a step back. This is still theater. It's not meant to demean. And as you include more and more of the African American community, it may not be necessary. But I do think, I would have been horribly traumatized if I hadn't been allowed to sing Aida, because the music is so gorgeous and the words are so magnificent. And she, as the Ethiopian princess, is what is magnificent.
So I know we focused on like a white person wearing makeup to look black or Asian, but I've seen, Barbara Hendricks, Leontine Price, Jesse Norman have makeup to be white women.
Right.
And there are many white sopranos available. So it's just like, when you guys are working in the field, is that ever anything y'all thought about, or was it just like this is a part of the job?
No, we were hysterically happy to hear Leontine wrap that gorgeous velvet instrument around, yes, a role that supposedly somebody white would be singing, but no one thought twice because we wanted to hear her artistry and her beauty and that magnificent voice. She didn't think twice about putting on something that made her complexion slightly lighter. It wasn't looked on as this. It's being utilized right now to bring attention to a much more dangerous disease, which is exclusion. And so in a way, it's opening the doors for a lot of the African American community to have their chance. And this is fantastic. But in the end, the pendulum is going to swing back to the center, and I hope that we will hear that makeup is makeup. That's it. And blackface, of course, is not allowed.
And so my last question on this topic of like Aida, something I found in my research was that like during this period where you're at the Met is Aprile Millo, Leona Mitchell, Susan Dunn, Deborah Voigt, Sharon Sweet, and Alessandra Mark. You guys are sort of all doing the same thing, particularly the Aidas and whatever, at the same time.
Right.
How did you guys like navigate that overlap of, or you guys like competing for, I don't know if competing is the right word, but like that, what am I trying to say, Matt?
What's interesting is that there are going to be periods in opera where there are many, many good singers. When you look way, way, way back, you had Muzio competing with Bori, you had Bori competing with, as you go forward, you have Zinka Milanov competing, and then Muzio felt left out, and then Milanov got chance, and then Tebaldi came, and then Tebaldi took over pretty much the match. She was the queen. You had Callas who came and visited, had fantastic chances, Olivero. A good house will always give you great options, because even in the old days, you had singers that were in the German school that were singing the Italian as well. So yeah, all these great voices. I remember The first time they did the production that I did in Rio de Janeiro, that was spectacular, and eventually became the opening night that I had the privilege to do, was created in the theater by Leona Mitchell, one of the greater, more beautiful voices, absolute, singing Aida, and she was spectacular. And I thought, wow, I'm going to have to really be good, because now when I take over, I have got to be worthy of that chance, because she was wonderful. And yes, Alessandra Mark, one of the great voices of all time, one of the true natural forces of nature. Sharon Sweet, I didn't hear that much, but also spectacular, wonderful, wonderful person. There were a couple of other wonderful voices at the same time that you kind of said, yeah, I lucked out, because I represented something that they did too in a way, but I was a more authentic alchemy of the Italian tradition. Or I'm glad at least somebody saw it that way, because then I got to do a lot of really wonderful stuff.
Something else that I'd sort of like to ask about that sort of time period in the 90s at the Metropolitan, or just really 90s in opera in general all over the world. I sort of felt like, just watching back, that opera went from a uh, very liberal-minded place about what singers could look like to a very
Mm-hmm.
narrow mind, and that it's starting to opening back up. But I sort of felt like maybe in the 90s and 2000s, there became a little bit more focus on TV and selling records and singers' appearances and being a little bit more telegenic. Is that something that you found to be true in that time period as well, or do I
You,
just have
you
silly?
ask a very dangerous question in the most seductive way, a seductive way. You're very, very good, and it is an important thing to bring up. I have never been one who feels that opera survives intact on a small screen. Whether you go to a movie theater or whether you go anywhere, you are getting let me say this, you're getting a reduced sound. One of the triumphs of opera is hearing that voice go over that orchestra, displacing air above you in an open house that you see, oh my God, it's lying to the top of the building with people, and I can hear it then, right? Nielsen never sounded the same on record as she did live. Tibaldi, forget about it. That was a beast that you couldn't capture on vinyl or anywhere else. It was magnificent and round and full of harmonies that unfortunately digitally analog, anything, you can't catch it. So if you're looking at it and you're saying, well, I can't get to the Met, or I can't afford it, and I can just pay $20 and go see it. And then you go to a movie theater. You're not seeing it. You're also seeing the pick of the director where you want your attention. Maybe I don't want to be watching that person. Maybe I want to be watching the Callas that's over here emoting the way she's listening. But we're not going to watch it, because we're going to watch the action that's chosen by the director. We're going to see the image that he sees. So when you go to the theater live, what I would say is, good for you that you have this option to be able to explore the magnificent world of opera. But if you really want to see the real beast, go live. Go live, my friends. There's no evening like that. Hawk whatever you have to nowadays, unfortunately, to buy a seat and go live. It's worth it. Pick a night when you know somebody who knows how to sing. And then you're hooked. For the rest of your life, it'll be a malitia like Violetta's TV. You will never be able to live without it. It's so spectacular and beautiful in art form.
On the subject of that, something that I wanted to speak to you directly, because I think you're one of the most vivid examples of it when we listen back to your recordings, is that all great singing must have an emotional and a spiritual aspect to it. And you're always so in tune with the different women you sing. So in tune
Thank
with,
you so much.
and you've done everything from a French queen to the owner of a saloon. Like, you've done everything. You've done everything.
The owner of a saloon, that's great. Minnie.
Yes, yes, Fanchula. But when you look back at the music that you've had the privilege of singing, the music that moves you, the music that moves your audiences, is there a specific aria or song or role that kind of always takes you to that, Ma lassù ci vedremo nel mondo migliore di Don Carlo?
Well, there's another, that's a divine moment. If you're asking me what takes me or what I might hear, if I get the chance to think of a melody as I cross over myself, as I go home, I would probably say it would be something of Verdi, yes, O Terra Dio,
Mhm.
maybe. Or I would probably say something of Chenier,
Yeah.
because the words are so important to me. And uh, a lot of the Verdi operas have that, what you just mentioned of the Ci vedremo in un mondo migliore. It's the way I try to live my life, looking always for the best world, and then bringing as many people with me as I can when I sing. And then I bring them back safely to their seats. And I say, you see how nice that world is? It's not so bad. Why don't you create it around you? Why don't you pass the beautiful forward? And that's it. Then my life means something. Then our time together means something. Because when I see singers sing and they're really great, they open their mouths and there's a light that's brought into the world. And that's what I would like to suggest happen in regular life. That we go down the street, stop staring at our screens on our little worlds that are these phones, and start looking for the light in people as we walk by them on the street. There are lights everywhere. It's like what I'm right now, I'm looking at two lights right now in these beautiful faces of Matt and Malik. You are two beautiful, beautiful people. I am so glad we got to spend a little bit of an afternoon together. And I feel different as a human being having met you.
I
So
cannot tell you how much that means, Maestro Milo. Thank you very, very much.
I had such fun. And I hope that those who disagree with me, like one third of this nation will probably disagree with a lot of what I've said, that maybe they'll open their hearts and realize God is colorblind, and all of his children were put on this earth to challenge the concept that one is better than the other, because no one is. God knows what he's doing. He made us all, he made flowers. You see that there are how many millions of different flowers out there? Did he mean that only one of them is good, or did he mean for you to have your, oh my gosh, the color, how magnificent. Why would he do less with his main creation, which was man and woman? I feel very blessed having met you both today. And I look forward to seeing this. And I beseech the young people out there to dream big and to realize that opera is large and grand because it amplifies, magnifies every emotion. And if you dumb it down and it's ordinary, it's not doing its job. It's a beautiful, beautiful world. I invite everybody into it. And for all of you out there that want to sing, find your sound. Let me hear your voice. And I still want your eyelashes. They're beautiful.
It has been an absolute privilege. It has been
The
an
privilege
absolute
is
privilege.
mine. I love you both. And if I get to see you, I'll give you the biggest hug. I hope I will get to see you whenever I'm performing. Just come back backstage and say hi. It's Matt. It's Malik, and that's it. Just say hey, we're getting in, and you won't have any problem whatsoever because you will be permanently family.